Welcome to MidLIFE Matters, where we celebrate women's wisdom and wit. I'm Georgian Lussier, your host, and I'm delighted to introduce today's guest, Michelle Traub. Michelle has a master's in healing and health, is a writer, and started her career as a dietitian. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you so much for having me.
So you've had several areas of focus in your career, and you're now looking to integrate body, mind, spirit.
That is right.
And if you could talk about your latest passion, the nature of narcissistic relationships is something that you're informing people about. And this emerged, I believe, from some of your own journey.
Yes. Yeah, I could say my career has been sort of a long and winding path. There's always been a connecting thread. When I look back at it, it was always about sharing information, sharing what I know. It started out in nutrition. I didn't really love being a dietitian. I ended up in the world of communications and did fall in love with that and became a writer and worked on websites. One of the greatest challenges in my career and in that journey and just in my life in general was that I kept running into what I would call manipulators or negative individuals who really sort of lowered my self-esteem. And I kept looking at my life and thinking, what is going wrong? I'm this overachiever. You know, I had studied really hard in school, and I was always trying to do well and be good. And no matter where I was, it seemed as though I was facing challenges where I wasn't good enough, and I was being criticized, or I had what I would almost call like bully bosses. It was not really until I wrote my first book in 2021 where I was exploring my online dating experiences, and I stepped back and I said, gee, I've like encountered a lot of narcissistic men in this path. What's going on? That I could see that I was having this pattern that had existed for a very long time. And I researched it and found it's very common in women who are overachievers and also women who are sensitive as myself, or people who are really driven to help and serve. What actually ends up happening is that encourages people to take.
Okay.
And I think that stepping back and seeing that, it sort of shifted a little bit of my career to say, I want to help other people with this challenge because it does affect you in all levels of your health. I know it was a driver in my autoimmune disease. I know it's been a driver in sort of low confidence, low energy. What I've done to heal it has been a collective mind, body, spirit work. So I want to continue to share that with other people.
Let's start with a loose definition of a narcissist.
That's a great question. I think many people know what we would call an overt narcissist. So this is the kind of person who's very grandiose, and they're bragging all the time, and they sort of, you might say, they suck the energy out of the room. We see this in politicians who are, I am the greatest, or even in entertainers. Very common. And usually you can see it and kind of say, oh, well, I don't really want to spend much time with that person. That's not really the tricky version of the narcissistic person. And I will say it's a spectrum.
Sure.
There's clinical diagnoses, but that is actually fairly rare because to be a clinical narcissist, you have to lack empathy completely. And luckily, most people don't totally lack it. It's just that they're very low in it. Frequently, they are not self-aware. They're not able to self-reflect. They don't have a strong sense of self. And they're often seeking adoration, admiration, love, attention from all the people around them. So the reason why someone might be maybe like a magnet, like I feel like I have been, is because I love to give people admiration. I love to be a giver. And so when I align with a narcissist, it's like a magnet. The trickiest piece, though, is there's a whole branch of narcissism that's called the covert narcissist. It's also called the victim narcissist. And this is the type of person who does not show up with a lot of arrogance. On the contrary, they seem very, oftentimes warm and friendly, but also sometimes they can be very meek. They can be, oh, poor me, nobody helps me, and I'm struggling so much. And again, that leads someone who has a lot of empathy and compassion to jump in and say, oh, I will help you, I will support you. And then you end up finding you're totally drained by this person. And when you're aware of it, you see it, and you see it actually quite readily. If you have really strong boundaries, which unfortunately I learned I did not, oftentimes it won't impact someone who is willing to say, okay, yeah, I'll help you, but I'm not going to move your whole house
Fix
in a
you.
weekend, right? Or I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna work for you for free or that kind of thing. It's a bit complicated. I feel like it's becoming a topic that's much more popular.
I've done management studies, and I believe most successful, you talk about politicians, but business people, men and women that rise to the top, have maybe more than a little healthy dose of narcissism,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
They've learned to work it in their favor. So one of the things when I was studying management was, do managers manipulate or motivate? Right, so people who can manipulate effectively, get people to really kind of sign on to the latest effort, whatever.
Yeah.
Again, can be very successful. So I could see where it'd be
Absolutely.
tricky.
Yeah, and I think that where I've struggled with it personally is that I tend to be in nonprofit work. And I had this sort of belief that everyone who's in nonprofit is doing it out of the goodness of their heart and they're really compassionate and they're really driven about the mission. Well, to your point, the leaders, they may have a drive that has some compassion to it, but that isn't their sole drive. They're looking for success. They're looking for monetary gain. I mean, I've worked in numerous nonprofit arenas where the lead management was making great six-figure salaries, and then the people at the bottom, all the dedicated worker bees, I like to call us, were making like poverty wages, 25, 35,000. What you're told by a manager like that is, well, we can't afford anymore. Well, don't you want to just do it out of the goodness of your heart? And you realize after a while, well, that's not going to pay the bills in the state of Connecticut. So, I mean, I do see that there's a value to some healthy narcissism, 100%. But sadly, what I think we are seeing with the social media madness is there's a lot more because people have this new freedom and vehicle to just be me. And I think our society is shifting in a way where that's becoming a little bit more damaging.
So a lot of self-promotion and
Absolutely. Yeah.
and then people who do make some discovery that they're not where they want to be or that they have a pattern that they want to change or break. You mentioned when we were talking before the show that you've identified some desires for people to kind of turn the ship around real quickly. Okay, now that I understand that,
Yeah.
I'm going to just kind of eliminate that from my behavior or my patterns, have a quick recovery. And you remarked that that can also be a barrier for people to get to a better state of well-being.
100%. Yeah. And then I saw this a lot in my nutrition career, and it was one of the things that drove me away is sort of this, Michelle, make me thin. Michelle, I need to, lower my cholesterol. And everybody wants it fast. We're in this like magic pill society where there's pharmacy on every corner and everybody just wants something to take to make their problems go away quickly.
Right.
But the reality is nothing goes away. Nothing that's worth doing is going to be worth doing and is going to have significant impact quickly. So when you realize you have a pattern of emotional abuse or narcissistic abuse, it is likely very much lodged in your subconscious, unfortunately, like a lot of our belief structures. And that's hardwired, and it's very tricky. And it's not going to just change because you realized it. And that's why my program, I feel like I try to be so comprehensive with people, because for my own healing, I've had to be really comprehensive and do all the work for many years. I first started on my integrative healing journey like 10 years ago, and I am just now, 10 years later, feeling like, oh yeah, I feel like I'm really comfortable with sharing this with other people. I was comfortable sharing it in terms of just, here's the information, here are the resources, you're welcome to delve into it. Now I'm like, I can filter this through my own life, my own experience, and I'm a real life case study of what has worked for me. And so it's a completely different mentality. But I think that, again, culturally and in the social media world, there's this thing we refer to as imposter syndrome. And I see it's a widely talked about subject in women oftentimes who are in their 20s and early 30s. And the theory is, it's just low self-esteem or lack of confidence. But my belief is every woman in their 20s and early 30s in their career feels like an imposter, and that is absolutely normal. It takes a really long time to learn the work world and to figure yourself out and to gain healthy confidence. Society becomes more narcissistic. There's all these people holding themselves to an unrealistic standard.